Alright, let's get into it. If you've been around this channel for a while, you already know the deal. I'm not chasing one specific genre, one specific format, or one correct way to enjoy spicy games. If something is interesting, well-built, or just sticks in my head after I stop playing, that's usually enough for me to want to talk about it. And over time, that adds up. This video brings together a bunch of games I've covered. Different styles, different pacing, different ideas, but all for the same reason. They actually gave me something to engage with. Not just to watch, but to play, think about, and sometimes even get a little too invested in. Some of these are slow and comfortable. Some are system heavy. Some are rough, experimental, or quietly ambitious. So think of this video less as a ranked list, and more like a curated walkthrough of indie spicy games that try. Games where someone clearly sat down and asked, how do we make this engaging to play? So take this however you want. Watch it in chunks, let it run in the background, or stop whenever something catches your attention. Whether you're here to discover something new, revisit a segment you liked, or just put something on and let it run in the background. This compilation is meant to be watched at your own pace. Alright, let's get into it. Lewd City Girls is exactly what happens when someone looks at a classic beat 'em up and says, yeah, but let's make it way more unhinged. You play as Kyoko on a very important mission to find her missing boyfriend, Riki. The core gameplay is classic side-scrolling brawler stuff. Punching, kicking, chaining combos, knocking enemies around the screen. Simple, satisfying, and easy to pick up. Now here's where things get spicy, but we'll keep it PG-ish. As you fight, you build up an SP meter, and when it's full, Kyoko can trigger special interactions that are definitely not safe for work, but presented through pixel animations rather than anything super realistic. There's also a risk-reward system where upgrading Kyoko makes her stronger, but getting hit can knock her back down a level. What I like here is that the game actually lets you choose your pace. You can rush through stages like a normal beat 'em up, or slow down and explore side encounters if you're curious. It's goofy, self-aware, and clearly made by people who understand both beat 'em ups and adult parody. Lure of Passion is one of those games that sneaks up on you. At first glance, it looks like a chill pixel art fishing game. And technically, yeah, you do fish, but you're definitely catching more than trout. You play as a fisherman, living alone in a rundown hut, slowly getting pulled into the lives of various characters around the area. Gameplay revolves around minigames. Fishing itself is reaction-based, almost rhythm-like, and there are other activities like card games and puzzle-style challenges. Progression is tied to completing tasks, unlocking new locations, and advancing character storylines. The adult content is woven into the narrative rather than dumped on you all at once, which actually makes the whole thing feel more cohesive. It's still very much an adult-only game, but the pixel art is charming, the updates are frequent, and it's clear the developers are building something long-term instead of a one-off joke title. 9 Lives of Yoki is a furry-themed pixel RPG that leans heavily into exploration and atmosphere. You play as Yoki, a white fox character with the ability to reincarnate and explore floating islands scattered across a mysterious region. At its core, this is a platformer with light RPG elements. You jump, avoid hazards, collect items, and slowly unlock new abilities. The main goal in each area is gathering special flowers, which you then offer at totems to progress or unlock bonuses. Yes, the game does include NSFW elements, but they're optional and tucked into specific scenes rather than constantly shoved in your face. Most of your time is spent exploring, learning the layout of the islands, and figuring out how to reach new areas. It's still very much in development, but the art style, music, and overall vibe already give it a surprisingly cozy feel. Just, you know, with extra fluff. Welcome to Greed Corp is one of the weirdest and honestly smartest adult games on this list. It's a dating sim roguelite set in a dystopian corporate nightmare. Your main job? Office work. Stamping papers, signing documents, photocopying nonsense, and trying not to lose your mind while climbing the corporate ladder. As you earn in-game currency, you can interact with coworkers, uncover conspiracies, and yes, pursue romantic or more questionable relationships. Every run can go differently, with branching paths and multiple endings depending on your choices. The adult content here feels more satirical than anything else. It's poking fun at corporate culture, burnout, and workplace power dynamics, all wrapped in crunchy pixel art and dark humor. If you like games that feel a little uncomfortable on purpose, this one's worth a look. Vivid Dead is a much slower, moodier experience compared to the others. This is a Japanese horror platformer that leans heavily into suspense, mystery, and unsettling atmosphere. You play as a sickly protagonist investigating strange incidents at a prestigious private school. Students are falling ill, rumors are spreading, and nothing feels quite right. Most of the gameplay revolves around platforming, combat, making choices, and piecing together clues. While the game does include adult elements, they're secondary to the story and presented in a more old-school style. The real strength here is the tension. The pixel art, sound design, and pacing all work together to keep you uneasy the entire time. If you're into intense games and don't mind a slower burn with darker themes, Vivid Dead stands out as something a bit different from the usual adult game formula. Let's start with something cozy. Goddess's Whim is a choice-driven visual novel that's all about conversations and emotional pacing. You're not running around, you're not grinding stats. You're just talking, listening, and slowly building connections with a cast of goddesses who actually feel distinct. Every choice slightly changes the flow of conversations, how characters react to you, and which routes open up. Some moments are dramatic, some are funny, and some are surprisingly wholesome for a game with a spicy tag. What I really like here is how low pressure it feels. This is the kind of game you open late at night, make a few choices, tell yourself just one more scene, and suddenly it's way later than you planned. It respects your time, and that's rare. Alright, now let's move into something with a bit more mystery under the surface. Lucky Paradox starts out feeling like a pretty chill romance sim. You arrive in the isolated town of Argleton, meet a bunch of girls, hang out, build relationships, all very comfy at first. But the longer you play, the more you realize there's something seriously off about this place. Behind the dating sim vibes, there's a deeper story involving powerful families, alternate realities, and secrets that slowly creep into the narrative. Your choices don't just affect romance routes, they actively shape how much of the truth you uncover. You can develop skills, explore different locations, and unlock side stories that all feed back into the main mystery. It's one of those games where you come for the character interactions, but you stay because you need answers. Switching gears. This next one is for anime fans. Devil's Academy DxD is a fan-made, alternate universe take on the high school DxD world. And it takes some bold narrative swings. Instead of following the original protagonist, you create your own character in a timeline where things went very differently. You choose your race, make key decisions, and build relationships with familiar characters, especially Rias. The focus here is fully on dialogue and romance. There's no big combat loop. The fun comes from shaping your own version of the story. Since development is community influenced, the game evolves based on player feedback, which gives it a very living project feel. If you like DxD but always wanted more control over the narrative, this one scratches that itch. Now let's go full comfort food visual novel. Total Maidness knows exactly what it is, and it doesn't pretend otherwise. You inherit a mansion, and surprise, it's full of charming maid girls. From there, it's classic Otome VN gameplay. Read dialogue, make choices, and follow different romantic routes. The writing leans into familiar tropes, mixing humor, light drama, and playful interactions. It's not trying to reinvent the genre, and honestly, that's part of the appeal. This is the kind of game you play when you just want something cute, straightforward, and relaxing, with just enough spice to keep things interesting. Alright, now things get uncomfortable. In a good way. 7 Days, with my yandere girlfriend, goes hard in a completely different direction. This is a dialogue-driven psychological horror game, where you're stuck dealing with an extremely possessive girlfriend. Every choice feels risky, and it's never clear which option is actually safe. Some choices calm things down, others make everything worse. And the tension comes from not knowing which is which. It's rough around the edges. Animations can be stiff, and there are some quality of life issues. But the writing does a great job building anxiety and pressure. If you like narrative games that keep you uneasy the entire time, this one definitely delivers. And finally, let's talk about Potential. Peach Hill's Division is a 3D narrative adventure set inside a military academy with a strong paranormal mystery vibe. You explore the campus, follow a day and night cycle, interact with characters, and slowly unlock story events as time passes. Certain scenes and interactions only appear once you've progressed far enough, which gives the whole game a structured, story-first flow. Right now, it's still in early access, and yeah, it has bugs and rough edges, but the 3D character models, atmosphere, and mystery-driven setup give it serious long-term potential. This is very much a keep an eye on it kind of game. Angel Under is one of those games that feels like a fever dream, but in a way where you can tell it's intentional. The setup is already wild. You've got Milo and Erin at the center, Erin being this sheltered, innocent monastery girl, and Milo basically navigating a demon-hunting reality show, like it's normal Tuesday content. The world is a vibrant, stylized desert city that somehow feels both colorful and depressing at the same time. Like a dystopia that discovered neon lighting, the tone is sharp. It balances dark themes with that kind of grotesque humor that reminds you of games like Lisa, and the dev even confirmed that influence. You'll see it in the weird character designs, the offbeat conversations, and the way it uses comedy to punch you in the stomach 5 minutes later. Gameplay-wise, what I love is that it's not just story. There are legit action segments where you're using firearms and melee with tight timing to deal with monsters. It's not mindless shooting. You're managing spacing, timing, and keeping control when things get chaotic. Recent updates also added a free roam structure, which is huge. Instead of being shoved down one path, you can choose which character missions to tackle, which makes it feel more like you're exploring this messed up world at your own pace. And you've got inventory items and equipment like emblems to tweak how you perform. Also, shout out to the dev for goofy secrets, like the Trumpet Man Easter egg that plays the opening notes of Lisa's theme. That's the kind of unhinged detail I live for. Okay, now let's talk about something that's way more hands-on controller, brain turned on. Essence Blade is an indie action game that's basically, can you survive the next wave over and over again until you're either a monster or you get folded. The core loop is wave-based combat with a real emphasis on movement. You're dashing, kiting, repositioning, trying not to get cornered, because enemies hit hard and you don't get to stand still and feel safe. You start simple, usually a knife, and as you progress, you unlock more weapons with different ranges, timings, and attack styles. The fun is learning what your current kit can do, then building around it as the game throws random upgrades at you, because this is where the roguelite side kicks in. After certain waves, you choose cards that give you buffs or new effects, health boosts, damage boosts, weapon skill buffs, and sometimes upgrades that totally change how you play. Every run turns into a different build, and that's what keeps it addictive. It also has difficulty tiers that feel like proper modes. Easy is a shorter run, medium is a longer test, hard is basically prove you deserve to be here, and each ends in a boss. And one feature I genuinely respect, the filter system. You can toggle content types on or off, or even disable the spicy content entirely, and still have a full game to play. That tells me the dev actually believes in the combat loop. Between runs, you've got an in-hub, plus a gallery where you can view unlocked stuff. But again, the gameplay is the star here. If you want an adult game with real mechanical teeth, this one qualifies. Shred Tear, Explosive Kajun, is what happens when someone says, let's make a high-speed hack and slash, and then crank everything up to 11. You play as Kajun-chan, a weaponized creation trying to escape a nightmare underground facility after being freed by this mysterious creature named Gnochi. The setting is grimy, industrial, and hostile. You can almost smell the metal and danger through the screen. Combat is push-forward style. The game wants you to move aggressively. You've got a basic combo system, but the real fun comes from the cooldown abilities, like the burst move that clears space and the dash drill that lets you carve through waves. Cooldowns aren't free though. You recharge your big moves by collecting rage orbs from defeated enemies, which creates this constant momentum loop. Kill fast, grab orbs, unleash bigger abilities. Repeat. It's that satisfying snowball feeling. It also mixes in QTEs and cinematic finishers that blend 3D animations with hand-drawn comic-style panels. That's a cool stylistic trick, because it keeps the pace cinematic without slowing the action to a crawl. There are customization settings too, including how much armor the character wears. but I'll keep it platform safe here. Let's just say the game is very confident in its aesthetic. If you want a demo that gives you a quick taste of the combat loop, it exists. And it's honestly one of those, you'll know in 10 minutes if it's your kind of madness games. Now let's go tactical. And surprisingly, hardcore. Girl Divers is basically top-down roguelike Helldivers energy, but with pixel art and a much more mischievous presentation. The main thing, missions are procedural, across different planets, with objectives like clearing infestations, collecting items, or launching rockets. It's not just kill everything, it's kill everything while doing the job and getting out alive. Loadouts matter a lot. You're running a squad with weapons and gadgets, and you can call in stratagem-style support. Airstrikes, bombing runs, special weapons, cooldown-based tools that can save a run, or completely backfire if you panic use them. Progression is built around unlocking new gear, weapons, armor with stat differences, advanced gadgets. Missions are scored too, which is great because it gives you reasons to replay and improve beyond "I survived." One detail that's honestly clever: the HUD portraits react to damage, and the game visually communicates your squad's condition as you take hits. It's a "you're falling apart" feedback loop that makes the tension feel immediate. And importantly, it has an optional SFW mode, which means it's one of the more stream-friendly entries if you want to cover the gameplay without risking your channel. This is one of those games where you show up expecting a gimmick and then realize the dev actually built a real roguelike shooter underneath it. Okay, gloves on, let's step into the ring. Boxing Babes 2 is a weirdly addictive mix of boxing mechanics, progression, and story framing, especially for a mobile title. You play as the coach, boss manager, guiding Hitomi through a regional tournament against multiple opponents. And the fights themselves use a straightforward but satisfying boxing toolkit: jabs, hooks, uppercuts, and special moves. The big win here is that progression feels earned. Training and skill upgrades actually change how you approach fights. You can build toward different styles: more aggressive pressure, more counter-focused timing, whatever fits you. There's also a chat mechanic woven into the narrative, which gives the game that sports drama on your phone vibe. You're managing training, fights, and story beats through that interface, which can be a fun change of pace. Now, the game definitely leans into spicy rewards as a hook, but from a pure gameplay standpoint, people who like simple combat plus steady progression loops tend to get stuck playing longer than they expected. The main caution is mobile monetization habits, energy systems, and all that. So just go in knowing it's not a pure premium experience, but mechanically, surprisingly solid. Now we're going into dark fantasy territory, and this is where the action part gets serious. Succubus: The Lustborn Curse is a 2D action platformer with a strong, hardcore vibe. The kind of game that doesn't apologize when you mess up. You play as Vesper, a succubus princess whose kingdom was taken. You're cursed, stripped down in power, and forced to fight through a grim world to reclaim everything. The combat is stamina-based and punishing. Dodges, parries, timed strikes, spacing. It's got that Souls-like pressure where button mashing gets you deleted. Weapons vary from whips to heavier blades. And upgrades matter because enemies don't play nice. Exploration is a big part of it too. You're moving through interconnected areas, finding secrets, unlocking traversal abilities like dashes and double jumps. It leans into that Metroidvania feeling, where the world opens up as you grow. There's also a resource mechanic tied to how you recover power and how you handle certain interactions, which can influence the ending. I'm not going into detail there. Just know there's a meaningful risk-reward layer beyond Kill Boss, Go Next. The community is split on difficulty. Some love it, some say it's frustrating, but everyone agrees the pixel animations are high quality, and the game actually demands skill. If you want an adult game that feels like a real action challenge, this one absolutely qualifies. Alright, time for Vampire Swordplay. And yes, it's as intense as it sounds. Vampire's Night is a 2D action side-scroller where you play a sword-wielding vampire princess and basically live in constant motion. The combat is fast and aggressive, dashing, dodging projectiles, chaining sword combos, carving through enemies while managing the fact that mistakes can be brutally punished. It's the kind of game where you feel amazing when you're in rhythm, and you feel pain when you're not. A big mechanic here is the capture struggle system. If you get grabbed, you enter a tense minigame where stamina and timing decide whether you break free. Alternatively, there's a seduction type skill you can unlock to flip situations. But either way, it adds pressure because getting caught isn't just lose HP, it's a whole problem. Progression includes unlocking skills, upgrades, and encountering new enemy types across areas like caves and monster-infested zones. Some players love the challenge, others think early builds can feel punishing due to save checkpoint limitations. So expect a bit of indie roughness, depending on version. But the animation quality, people consistently praise it. The pixel work is smooth, expressive, and very polished for a game that's still actively evolving. Nurtale Neshe is a dark fantasy dungeon escape game that blends stealth, tension, and action survival decision making. And it's honestly way scarier than you'd expect at first glance. You play as Neshe, trapped in a demon-infested dungeon. And the core loop is brutal but compelling. You try to escape, you get hunted, you get caught, and then you try again. Learning the layout, learning enemy patterns, and slowly building the knowledge you need to survive longer. The stealth system matters because enemies react to sound, footsteps, movement, noise management. You have to think like you're actually trying not to be heard. And the AI can feel genuinely threatening, which is why you'll see people describe it like, I didn't expect to be this tense. A major gameplay layer is the cursed item system. Different restraints directly affect what you can do, like limiting running, limiting navigation tools, or changing how you move through the dungeon. It's not just aesthetic, it changes your options, which makes every escape attempt feel different. It also has roguelike-ish exploration, looting item boxes, preparing your run, dealing with resource RNG, and adapting when you don't get what you want. Some players hate the RNG. Others say once you learn the systems, you can become way too strong. It's early access, so bugs happen. Crashes, detection glitches. But the dev is apparently responsive, and the game already has a strong core identity. It's tense, it's strategic, and it keeps you engaged because every run teaches you something. Five Nights at Fuzzboobs might look like a parody on the surface, but under the jokes, this is still a proper survival horror experience. You play as a night guard, stuck in a small office from midnight to 6 AM, with limited power and a security system that constantly forces hard decisions. Cameras drain power, lights drain power, doors drain power, and the power drops fast. What makes this game stressful is how much it punishes overconfidence. You can't just watch cameras non-stop. You're forced to rely on audio cues, shadows, and timing. If you panic, you lose. If you hesitate, you lose. Each animatronic behaves differently. Freddy advances based on a hidden laugh counter and slowly approaches while staring into the camera. Bonnie and Chica attack from the side doors, often giving subtle hints like footsteps or shadows. Foxy demands constant attention. Ignore her too long, and she sprints straight at you. Failing doesn't just mean a simple game over. It means you misread the situation, and that's where the tension comes from. The community is split on difficulty. Some say later modes rely too much on luck. Others swear it's all about mastering strict camera-locking strategies. Either way, this game absolutely demands focus. Add hidden secrets like Golden Freddy, collectibles, Easter eggs, and challenge modes, and you've got a horror parody that ended up being way more intense than anyone expected. Now let's switch to something slower. The kind of horror that creeps up on you while you're clicking. Anomaly. Evolution is a horror game that works gradually. And that's what makes it unsettling. At first glance, it looks like a simple idle clicker. You click, generate cells, buy upgrades. Simple, but you're evolving SCP-style anomalies. And the further you go, the more disturbing those evolutions become. Early forms feel almost harmless. Later stages, not so much. You're not just upgrading stats. You're watching something transform into a godlike, unnatural entity. The game adds pressure through hostile xenocytes, which actively fight your progress. If you don't invest in combat-related upgrades, they can completely stall you. The problem? The game barely explains this system, which leads to genuine frustration and tension. There's also a prestige system where you reset your progress for long-term gains. That means constantly choosing between short-term growth and future power. Players praise the variety in creature designs, especially later evolutions that genuinely feel monstrous. Others criticize the grind and lack of tutorial clarity. But from a horror standpoint, it works, because it's about losing control while pretending you're in charge. Let's talk about a place you really don't want to be stuck inside. Pizza Lab Complex Redux takes FNAF-style horror and turns it into exploration-based survival. You're trapped inside a massive futuristic pizzeria nightclub after a security failure. Once inside, the doors lock, and hostile animatronics begin roaming freely. Unlike classic FNAF, you're not stationary. You explore dark hallways, solve puzzles, unlock doors, and constantly worry about what's behind the next corner. The game leans heavily into environmental storytelling. You find clues through hidden rooms, objects, and strange interactions scattered throughout the complex. You're assisted remotely by allies, but help always feels limited. Animatronics like Lena and Mandy don't just chase. They have unique mechanics that force you to rethink how you move and plan. Some decisions actually matter. Choosing whether to fight or avoid certain characters can trigger consequences, lock content, or lead to regret later. And players really feel that. The tension comes from exploration itself, navigating dark areas, memorizing layouts, and realizing you might have missed something important. Let's move into something colder, harsher, and way less forgiving. SCP. Nexus delivers horror through systems and pressure, not jump scares. You play as a Foundation agent caught in a global conspiracy, involving powerful anomalies and a looming world-ending scenario. The tone leans heavily into paranoia and distrust. Combat is turn-based tactical RPG, but intentionally unforgiving. Enemies manipulate turn order, drain resources, heal excessively, and punish mistakes hard. Ammo matters. Healing items matter. Positioning matters. And sometimes, even when you do everything right, RNG can still work against you. This has made the game controversial. Some players call the difficulty unfair. Others argue it forces careful strategy and preparation. The horror comes from knowing the system itself might screw you, which honestly fits the SCP universe perfectly. Visually, the art is praised, but some players note navigation issues and unfinished feeling areas. Still, when it clicks, the game creates genuine anxiety through mechanics alone. Let's change the flavor of horror completely. Catmorphosis starts off almost silly, and that's part of the trap. You play as Johan, fresh off a breakup, who orders a cat from a suspicious website. The premise feels absurd, until it isn't. The game slowly shifts from mundane office life into something deeply unsettling. The cat isn't normal. The encounters grow stranger. The tone darkens with every chapter. The bright, colorful art style contrasts heavily with what's actually happening, which makes the horror hit harder. It feels wrong, intentionally. Gameplay is VN-based, with branching dialogue choices and escalating consequences. The horror here is about escalation, watching things spiral while knowing you could have walked away earlier. Early impressions praise the originality of the premise, but warn it's very niche. Still, for players who enjoy bizarre, transformation-heavy psychological horror, it's memorable. This is where horror stops being traditional and starts getting existential. Pattern Screamers is pure existential horror. The core idea revolves around entities that don't exist, until they're perceived. The more you learn about them, the more power they gain. You investigate anomalies inspired by deep SCP lore, interacting with files, dialogue trees, and puzzles that directly affect how dangerous these entities become. Knowledge itself is a threat. Some choices make things worse simply by acknowledging something's existence. Others hide information, but at a cost. The game is heavy on lore, slow-paced, and mentally demanding. Fans of SCP mythology love the attention to detail. Newcomers often feel overwhelmed. Multiple bad endings, hidden achievements, and logic-based puzzles reward careful thinking, but punish curiosity. This isn't loud horror. It's the kind that sits in your head. My Fluffy Neighbor is one of those games that doesn't rush you, and that's exactly why it works. You play as Marcus, an otaku stuck in a routine that feels painfully familiar. Work, home, repeat. The turning point is Roxy, a goth furry neighbor who suddenly enters his life and disrupts that monotony in a very direct way. What surprised me early on is how natural the pacing feels. The game is mostly linear, yes, but instead of feeling restrictive, it feels focused. Conversations flow smoothly, jokes land without dragging, and characters don't feel like they exist purely to flirt with the player. In your first hour, you're mostly settling into Oak Ridge, learning the rhythm of Marcus's daily life, and getting comfortable with the dialogue style. There aren't big systems thrown at you. It's about mood, tone, and getting attached to the characters. As the game progresses, updates like the Moonfall Festival expand the world significantly. Suddenly, the town isn't just a backdrop anymore. It feels like a place with events, secrets, and little surprises tucked away. That update alone adds a solid chunk of playtime and introduces mystical elements that shake up what you thought the story was going to be. One thing I genuinely appreciate is player control. Recent versions let you opt out of specific scenes, which makes the experience feel more customizable without breaking immersion. This is a game you play late at night, telling yourself, just one more scene, and suddenly realizing an hour disappeared. Not because it's intense, but because it's comfortable. Let's move into something that actually asks you to move, explore, and fight back. The Adventures of Kincaid is where furry spice meets real mechanical depth. You play as Kincaid, a wolf girl archaeologist exploring alien planets alongside her AI companion, I. From the moment you pick up the controls, it's clear this is a proper Metroidvania. Not just visually, but structurally. Your first hour is all about exploration. You're jumping through jungle environments, punching hostile creatures, discovering dead ends, and slowly realizing, okay, I'm going to need upgrades to get back here later. Combat feels snappy. Kincaid's punches are responsive. And once you start reflecting projectiles or chaining movement abilities, the flow really clicks. Later updates added stealth mechanics, which was a smart move. Suddenly, not every encounter is about brute force. The spicy elements exist as part of Kincaid's personality. She gets distracted. You, as the player, decide whether to keep her focused or let things spiral. These moments get logged in a journal, which actually adds a sense of continuity rather than feeling like random scenes. What kept me playing was the balance. Even if you removed all adult content, the platforming, exploration, and boss encounters would still hold up. Some bosses genuinely demand pattern recognition and good timing. Yes, development is slow, and people want a final release. But from a gameplay standpoint, this already feels like a complete experience. Just one that's still growing. Now, if you like systems stacking on top of systems, this next one goes way bigger. The Forgotten Island is ambitious, and it knows it. You're shipwrecked on a mysterious island, and quickly realize this isn't a simple dating sim. The core loop is RPG first. Combat, party management, crafting, economy, and exploration all work together. Your first few hours are spent recruiting companions. Not just romantic interests, but actual party members with combat roles. Each character brings skills that matter in battle, and synergy becomes important fast. Combat is turn-based, but not passive. You're constantly thinking about positioning, abilities, and party composition. As relationships deepen, new scenes unlock, but also new combat advantages and story branches. Outside of combat, there's a full simulation layer. You manage resources, upgrade your home, farm, take side quests, and explore 2D maps filled with puzzles and lore. It feels like the dev asked, what if a furry dating sim actually played like a full RPG? Updates are massive. Characters get expanded, systems evolve, and the dev is extremely transparent. Bugs exist. It's early access. But the scope is impressive. This is one of those games where you don't notice how long you've been playing until you stop. Because there's always one more system to check, one more relationship to push forward. Alright, up until now, we've talked about open exploration and layered systems. Now let's move into something much more controlled, but also way more socially tense. Luxuria Academy is one of those games where the hook isn't just the characters, it's the world they live in. You play as a human, entering an academy populated entirely by Anthro students, and from the very beginning, the game makes it clear, you don't belong here. Humans don't use magic, Anthros do, and that imbalance quietly drives almost every interaction. Your first hours are heavy on setup. You're learning routines, meeting classmates, and slowly realizing how segregated this place really is. Some characters are curious about you, others are openly uncomfortable, and the game doesn't rush to make everyone friendly, which honestly makes the relationships feel more earned. Gameplay is chapter-based, and pacing is deliberate. You're not bombarded with choices every 5 seconds. Instead, decisions come at moments where they matter, often shaping how certain characters open up, or shut you out, later on. One thing that really stood out during my playtime is how each character has an arc beyond romance. Family issues, social pressure, personal expectations. Those themes get woven into the narrative naturally, rather than feeling like filler between scenes. Recent updates added more interactivity during scenes, which was a direct response to community feedback. That kind of dev responsiveness goes a long way, especially in long-form VNs like this. Visually, it's consistently strong. Expressions are clear, anatomy is well drawn, and the Android version runs surprisingly well for a game this detailed. This one isn't finished yet, but it's very easy to see the long-term vision. If you enjoy VNs that care about world building and slow burn character development, Luxuria Academy is absolutely one to keep an eye on. From structured academy life and social tension, let's slow things down and step into something much softer. The Scaly Valley is comfort gaming in furry form. Set in a high fantasy world populated by dragonesses, this game intentionally avoids high drama and constant conflict. Instead, it focuses on companionship, quiet moments, and building relationships at your own pace. Your early hours are very relaxed. You meet the cast, explore the valley, and start choosing who you want to spend time with. Dialogue choices shape relationships gradually, and the game never pressures you to rush toward any specific route. What makes it work is restraint. The game knows exactly what it wants to be: cozy, romantic, and emotionally light. There's no attempt to overload the player with systems or mechanics just for the sake of depth. Art direction is a big strength. Character designs are expressive, animations are smooth, and the overall aesthetic feels polished. Especially impressive considering this is largely a solo dev effort. Progression is episodic, and updates have been steady. Each chapter expands the narrative slightly, adding new interactions rather than dramatically shifting tone. Some players want the plot to move faster, which is fair, but if you approach this as a slow burn, it's very satisfying. This is the kind of game you play when you want to unwind, not optimize. And sometimes, that's exactly what you're looking for. Let's talk about survival, hierarchy, and social pressure. The tribe puts you in a genuinely unusual position. You're the last man in a world dominated by tribal anthro women, and survival isn't about fighting. It's about belonging, or at least pretending well enough that you don't get pushed out. Early gameplay revolves around learning the structure of the world. Different tribes, different leaders, different expectations. You explore locations, take on quests, and slowly unlock professions that help you contribute to the group. Relationships are central, but not in a traditional dating sim way. Choices matter in terms of status, trust, and survival. Who you align with affects how others see you, and some paths can close off entirely depending on your decisions. Mechanically, it leans more toward management and exploration than action. Some players find it relaxing, others wish for more mechanical complexity. But the core appeal is the setting and social dynamics. The art is a highlight. Characters are expressive, with different poses and stances that help sell emotional states during dialogue. That visual feedback makes interactions feel more alive, even when the mechanics themselves are simple. It's not a fast-paced game, and it's not trying to be. If you enjoy slow progression, world building, and relationship-driven storytelling, the tribe offers a very specific and very niche experience. Last one, and this is the smallest in scope, but still deserves its time. Brewing Troubles started life as a game jam project, and you can feel that in its compact structure, but also in how focused it is. This is a corruption-focused furry game built almost entirely around choices. You customize your character, make narrative decisions, and watch how those decisions affect both story outcomes and character states. Your first playthrough is about discovery. You're learning how the corruption mechanics work, how traits influence outcomes, and which choices push things in different directions. It's not long, but it's polished. The UI is clean, systems are easy to understand, and Android support works smoothly, which already puts it ahead of a lot of small indie projects. The dev has been very transparent about scope. This isn't meant to be a massive, endless game. It's a contained experience designed to be replayed a few times to see different paths. Some players wish it were bigger, especially after seeing the developer move on to a more ambitious successor project. But as it stands, Brewing Trouble succeeds at being exactly what it promises: a small, well-made, choice-driven furry game. Factorial Omega is one of those games that sounds like a meme on paper, until you actually play it and realize it's built like a full-on lifestyle sim with teeth. You're an anon at rock bottom. No job, no girlfriend, living in a rough megacity where everything feels rigged against you. The game wastes no time making you feel that pressure either. Rent, hunger, mental stability. You're basically always one bad week away from spiraling. Then the inciting moment hits. A military truck nearly crashes outside, and in the chaos you find Jun, an advanced, incomplete robot that immediately becomes both your lifeline and your problem. Because keeping her isn't free. Not in this world. Not with your landlord breathing down your neck. And not with black market tech being the kind of thing that gets people nosy real fast. Mechanically, what makes this game special is the way it forces you to juggle survival and attachment at the same time. You've got hunger and sanity bars, and the little details are brutal in a way that actually feels thematic. Eating the cheap dispenser bread keeps you alive, sure, but it can mess with your sanity. So you start thinking like, okay, I'm surviving, but I'm becoming miserable. And then the game gives you little ways to recover. Taking walks, spending time with Jun, stabilizing your routine, which makes it feel like you're actively fighting the city's vibe. The economy is where it gets unhinged in a good way. The stonk system is not a throwaway joke. It's a real stock market simulation that people end up using to fund big upgrades. And yeah, save scumming is basically a community tradition here, because the high-end robot parts and premium upgrades can get absurdly expensive. But the reason it doesn't feel like pure grinding is because the game turns it into a survival strategy. You're not min-maxing for fun. You're min-maxing because you don't want to get evicted. Then you've got the side activities. Streaming Jun for money with a dynamic comment system that genuinely feels like the dev has seen the internet up close. A rhythm minigame at the labor office. Fishing, gambling, little distractions that make the world feel alive and also make you feel like you're clawing your way upward. And the customization is insane. Jun isn't just choose outfit A or B. You're swapping parts, upgrading limbs, adjusting personality modules, changing how she behaves and reacts, and unlocking an absurd amount of clothing. It turns the relationship side into something physical and tangible, like you're building a companion, while also trying not to drown. The thing that really sold me is the small interaction layer, holding her hand, rubbing her cheek, tiny stuff. But it makes the mood feel weirdly intimate in a way a lot of games don't even attempt. And when you combine that with the fact there are tons of endings, some hilarious, some bleak, some genuinely difficult to trigger, it becomes one of those games you replay just to see how different your life can end up depending on what you prioritize. It's cynical, it's oddly cozy at times, it's stressful, and it's absolutely a game that knows what it is. Let's switch into something that's way more modern feeling and way more quietly addictive. Lovers is one of those games where you sit down expecting something lightweight, and then 3 hours later you're like, wait, why am I actually invested right now? The pitch is simple. It looks like a dating app. You set up a profile, you browse, you match, and you start messaging. The twist is that every match is an AI character, and the game doesn't treat that like a gimmick. It treats it like the foundation for the entire tone. What makes Lovers hit different is the two worlds structure. You've got the grounded side, daily life stuff, real world energy, and then this neon lit virtual space that feels like full dive VR, where the vibe shifts into something more mysterious. It's not just romance, there's a layered narrative running under it. And the further you go, the more it starts to feel like you're poking at something you weren't supposed to access. The writing is a huge part of why it works. There's a ton of dialogue, like genuinely massive, but it doesn't feel like word salad. The conversations usually have direction. They build character voice, they build tension, they build curiosity. And because the format is messaging, the pacing feels natural in this very modern way. You're not staring at a static VN box thinking, okay, next line. You're in a flow of back and forth that can feel surprisingly intimate. Mechanically, the matching system is simple, but it's smart. It's not just pick the cutest character. There's a sense of approach, timing, and choice. You're shaping outcomes through messaging decisions, and those choices feed into branching routes and multiple endings. The game isn't constantly screaming, this is a big choice, but you feel it later when a conversation turns colder, or when a route opens up that clearly wouldn't have existed if you'd answered differently earlier. The PC version also commits hard to being a full VN experience. Illustrated scenes, hand-drawn art where it matters, and a structure that feels like you're progressing through chapters of an overarching mystery, not just collecting dates. The thing I really appreciated during play is how much the devs seem to care about flow. Updates made the saves more resilient, events unlock in a smoother way, and the experience feels surprisingly stable for something that's still growing. That matters a lot for immersion, because if a game like this breaks its own pacing, the whole illusion collapses. And immersion is basically the whole point here. Lovers is meant to feel like a private little world you step into. It's not loud. It's not chaotic. It's more like you're slowly getting pulled into something you don't fully understand. And you keep going, because the writing keeps dangling questions right in front of you. If you want a spicy VN that feels modern and intimate, Lovers is genuinely worth a look. Third Crisis is one of those games that looks like a spicy parody RPG at first glance, and then it keeps escalating until you realize it's actually doing something way more intense than you expected. You're in Karseberg, a dystopian city where an organization called Pitho has basically weaponized desire as control, and you play as Jenna, codename Vibe, who starts off as this conservative, mission-focused hero type. She's not the anything goes protagonist. She's the opposite, and that contrast is what makes the game's main system actually land, because Third Crisis revolves around its purity versus corruption pathing, and it's not just a checkbox. It affects pacing, tone, content, and the feel of the whole playthrough. Staying pure can feel like you're pushing uphill. Slow progression, more resistance, more restraint, while giving in can unlock faster content, bigger shifts, and a completely different kind of momentum. Gameplay-wise, it's an XCOM-style grid system. Turn-based combat, positioning, abilities, tactical choices. Some fights feel straightforward. Others force you to think about spacing and tempo. It's not the deepest tactical game ever made, but it's functional. And because the game is so narrative-heavy, the combat mostly serves as a pressure system that makes the world feel hostile. Where the game surprised me is the writing. The world building is way more serious than it needs to be. Characters have motivations. Some antagonists don't feel like cartoon villains. You can understand why they hate the protagonist. And sometimes you're even sitting there like, okay, that's a fair point actually. That adds weight to the moral side of the game, because your choices aren't happening in a vacuum. And content-wise, it's dense. Tons of animated scenes, a huge cast, recruitable allies, side characters that actually matter. You can meet people who feel like throwaway NPCs at first, and then realize they're part of bigger arcs. The game has this universe energy, like it's trying to be a whole franchise, not a single release, especially with the modding update and the spin-off expanding the setting. It's also one of those games where you learn quickly to use multiple save slots, because choices can lock you into routes or outcomes you didn't predict. That's not a gotcha feeling. It's more like the world reacts, and you're responsible for the direction you push yourself. Third Crisis is the kind of game you play, and you can tell the dev wanted it to feel like a full RPG with consequences, not just a spicy VN with a combat minigame attached. If you like the idea of a tactical, story-heavy 2D game where the core tension is literally your character's moral direction, yeah, this one will keep you busy. Monster Triple Experiment is the kind of game that tricks you with its vibe, because visually it's cute. The art direction has charm, characters are expressive, cutscenes have that surprisingly wholesome energy, and then you realize you're basically working a job. You're a junior researcher at Nuwailiki Laboratories, managing kin, monster beings, while balancing 3 core resources: your level, your funding, and your reputation. And the big thing here is that the game isn't trying to be an adrenaline rush. It's trying to feel like a schedule. You're handling requests, adjusting rooms, messing with lighting, temperature, styles, basically trying to keep each kin comfortable enough to progress. Diet matters too, which sounds small, but it becomes part of the loop. You start thinking in routines. Okay, feed this one, adjust that room, check funding, don't get fired. Because funding pressure is real. Running out of money doesn't just slow you down, it can end your run. And that creates a very different kind of tension than combat-based games. It's the slow anxiety of, if I waste time or mismanage, I'm done. The customization and branching systems are also bigger than they look. There are choices for content types, narrative dialogue changes depending on what you select, and the game tries to make those decisions feel integrated instead of being a separate menu that screams, toggle content here. The main split in how the experience feels comes down to pacing. there are moments where the management loop becomes repetitive, like real-time waits that can feel more like the game is daring you to stay patient. And when you're sitting there, doing paperwork in-game, you either vibe with the slow routine, or you get annoyed. But when it's working, it's oddly immersive, because the characters are genuinely likable, the art sells personality, and the loop gives you that one more task, one more day feeling. It's that management sim itch. You're always one more efficient choice away from a better run. Where I personally wanted more was in late-stage relationship depth. Once you establish a connection, dialogue can start to feel exhausted too quickly, and you'll find yourself wishing the game had more post-progress interactions, so things don't feel like they stop the moment you finish a path. Still, as a 2D spicy management/dating sim hybrid, it's a rare one. It's slow, it's structured, and it feels like it's trying to be a real sim with adult content layered into it, not replacing it. Problematic Subjects is one of those games that has a wild premise, but then it surprises you by being way more mechanically demanding than you expect. You play as Emily Green, a teacher managing detention sessions with a cast of problem students, and the core gameplay hook is essentially a memory and preference system. You're not just clicking through dialogue, you're learning patterns. You're remembering what works for which character. You're trying to execute sessions cleanly, because the game will absolutely punish sloppy play, and I mean that in a good way. Because if you go in thinking it's just a sequence viewer, you'll bounce off. But if you go in treating it like a system-driven game, where you're trying to master a loop, suddenly it becomes addictive. You'll mess up, restart, learn, improve, and that "I almost had it" feeling kicks in. Progression is structured with levels, detention as the main base, and then the infirmary being added later in updates, with unlocks tied to performance. You're opening up animations, postures, gallery content, and endings. And the fact that each level has multiple endings, plus a true ending route, gives it that completionist pull. Production value is also a huge part of why it lands. The art style is consistently strong, animations have polish, and voice acting adds this layer of personality that makes the characters feel present instead of just drawn. Recent updates also cleaned up a lot of friction points. Better readability, better indicators for danger states, better saves, and fewer soft locks. That's important because this game is all about maintaining flow. If the system feels unfair or unclear, it stops being a challenge and starts being annoying. The improvements push it more toward hard but learnable, which is the sweet spot. Now, the one thing you'll feel pretty quickly is that the game expects persistence. Some players take a lot of attempts to finish runs cleanly, and I can see why. It's one of those "this is harder than it looks" games. And yeah, there's monetization friction, with some content being locked behind Patreon. I won't pretend that doesn't change the vibe for some players. But strictly from a gameplay standpoint, this is one of the few spicy games where you can genuinely say, this is a skill loop. You're not just consuming content, you're earning progress through understanding the game. If you want something 2D, spicy, and surprisingly intense in a "I'm actually locked in right now" way, this is that. Price for freedom. Avarice is one of those games that doesn't need to shout to feel heavy. You're in Lumiere, a city under occupation, and you play as Kale, caught in political tension, economic survival, and personal sacrifice. And right away, the tone is oppressive in a grounded way, not fantasy grimdark. More like, this feels like a place where normal people don't get happy endings for free. The core hook is avarice, but not in the cartoon greed is evil sense. It's more like, what are you willing to do when survival becomes the main currency? How much of yourself do you trade away to keep going? Mechanically, it's a choice-driven VN with RPG-like pressure. Money matters. Resource management matters. You're tracking finances, making decisions that affect your standing, and building toward different political alignments. And the game does something I really like. It makes the economic system feel like part of the story, not just a meter on the side. You'll have moments where you're staring at a choice thinking, if I pick the morally cleaner option, do I lose the resources I need for later? That's not a cheap trick. It becomes the emotional engine of the game. Because you're constantly balancing what you want to do against what you can afford to do. The branching is deep too. Decisions affect Kale's personality, relationships, alliances, and access to story paths. And the game has that use multiple save slots energy, because content can be missable, not in a cruel way, more in a realistic way. Your decisions close doors, because of course they do. The writing is where it really shines. Political drama is engaging enough that the adult content often feels like something that happens inside the world, rather than being the whole point. Characters like Alara and Vesper have genuine depth, and the game is good at making you care, which is dangerous, because once you care, the consequences start to hit harder. Visually, it's strong. The 2D art and backgrounds support the bleak industrial atmosphere, and when the story goes into darker territory, the visuals match that tone without becoming edgy for the sake of it. Pacing can feel slow early on, because the game wants you to feel the grind of survival. Building enough resources, learning how the systems work, understanding how to trigger major events. But once it ramps up, it's the kind of story that can make you stop and just stare at the screen for a second after a choice. It's one of the rare spicy VNs where you walk away remembering the politics and the consequences just as much as anything else, because the game actually earns that emotional weight. And that's the full run. If you made it all the way through, or even just dropped in for a few segments, I really appreciate it. What I like about putting something like this together is seeing how wide this space actually is. When you line these games up back to back, it becomes pretty clear that spicy doesn't mean one thing. It can mean comfort, it can mean tension, it can mean heavy systems, quiet moments, messy ideas, or surprisingly thoughtful design. And honestly, that variety is what keeps me interested. If you found something new here, or if one of these segments made you think, okay, maybe I'll actually check that out, then this video did its job. If you enjoyed this kind of breakdown, drop a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which game stuck with you the most, or which one you'd want to see covered again in more depth. As always, no judgment here.